Very common scenario. You're at a party, there's a lot of people there, you see an acoustic guitar against the wall, you pick it up, you've been playing a little bit, you start strumming a couple chords, maybe like a C chord, to a G chord, to an A minor chord twice. People are starting to take notice. They're gathering around. You're attracting the attention of the fair sex. But they keep looking at you like they're waiting for something else to happen. Like maybe you're supposed to be doing something a little more impressive. One by one, they start to disappear. You're becoming alone. You're becoming desperate. All of a sudden, you're just, reaching into the deepest bag of tricks. You're like, oh, wait, I can play Wonderwall. It's too late. They're gone. And the reason they left is because you bored them to death playing the same strumming pattern on the same chords, but this is a very easy problem to fix, and I'm going to show you how to do it right now. So we're going to take the same progression, right? 3 chords. We have 1 bar, 4 beats of C, 1, 2, 3, 4, G, a bar of A minor, and another bar of A minor. So what I want to focus on is that 4th bar, that 2nd bar of A minor. We're going to do something to make it more interesting. I hate this chord progression, C, G, A minor. It's boring me just having to play it while I'm doing this, but it's a great example for how you can take a simple chord and use a couple different things to kind of spice it up, right? So again, we've got this C to a G, A minor. Now for this 4th bar, this A minor, we're gonna freeze it. And what I'm thinking in my head of different things to do is taking that A minor chord first. I'm gonna cycle through some voicings I know, right? So I have the regular A minor voicing, a 2nd one, a 3rd one, and a 4th one. Right? Now another thing that I could do is I can think of a scale. So I'll take the A minor scale. So in my head, the scale lights up. And then yet another thing I can do is think of an arpeggio. An arpeggio where I play that chord 1 note at a time through a scale. So this is also lighting up for me. Okay? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use chord voicing, scales, and arpeggios to replace that 4th bar of A minor with an A minor type feel that's going to make the back end of this progression a lot more interesting, right? So let's start out with just the chord voicings, right? We're going to have the C to the G, the regular A minor, the 2nd bar, right? So just by doing that, and this is kind of a boring way to do it, I'm just literally cycling through 4 different A minor chord voicings. Here's the first one. Here's the 2nd one. 3rd one, 4th one. So this is a good reason to learn a couple different chord voicings because you can always replace existing, maybe boring chords with them. So we've got C to G to A to A to A to A, back to C. Right? So just right there, I've done one thing just by using my knowledge of chord voicing, cycling through them and kind of making it more interesting. Now the next thing, and we're going to make this more interesting in the most boring way possible. So what I mean by that is we're going to play the A minor scale note for note in replacement of that 4th bar. C, G, A minor scale. All right, so I've got 4 beats, so I can cut those in half and get 8, which gives me the first 8 notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and back to C. Back to C, right? Now, again, this is just an example. This isn't like an exciting way to do it. This is just showing you how you can use some of these scales and shapes to replace parts and make things more interesting, right? Now, ultimately, you're not going to do just scales, just chord voicing or arpeggios, but now we're going to look at the arpeggios, right? So arpeggio is just playing that chord 1 note at a time. An A minor chord is an A, a C, and an E. So if we take this minor scale and play just an A, a C, and an E, there's the first octave arpeggio. Then to the next, A, C, E, A, there's another octave arpeggio. So we can kind of run through it. Okay, so again, I'm not really doing anything crazy fancy. This is just really a boring way to make it more interesting just by playing a straight arpeggio, but it already sounds better. C, G, A minor to the arpeggio. Back to C. Right, so this is a great example of why you should have at least a couple arpeggios in your back pocket, a couple chord voicings in your back pocket, because you can use them to replace all these things, right? Now, let's make some of these a little more interesting so they don't just sound like exercises. And let's take kind of an arpeggio that's from the A minor scale, right? So what we just did, we just climbed through A, C, E, A, C, E, A, right? But a more interesting way to do it is kind of to use pull-offs, right? So if we go into the back end of the A minor scale that we looked at, we're gonna take this A, this C, and this E. So you can kind of think of this as an inversion arpeggio, however you want to look. You can think of it as part of the scale. It doesn't really matter. It's just something you can do where we're gonna go pinky on 8 to pull off 5, and then up a string to the E. So this is an A minor arpeggio. Now you can substitute this arpeggio for any chord, any minor chord, as long as whatever this note is your root. So if you have something with an E minor, you can just find the E, which is right here, and then you can kind of do a, to replace that, right? So we're gonna jump right to this spot, right? And since I'm pulling off my pinky, I'm gonna jump with my pinky. So C to G to A. Right? I'm just using this voicing, which sits really well with this arpeggio. Once you get more familiar with the shapes, then you can do things a little more interesting and kind of flashy, like any kind of pentatonic thing, right? So let's go to the A minor pentatonic, which is just the A minor scale, essentially, and kind of just throw some stuff together from a C to a G to an A, C to a G to an A. All I'm doing is I'm jumping into a scale shape or an arpeggio, however you want to look at it. Again, this is just the way I kind of see things. I think eventually after you practice these your own way, you'll kind of find different arpeggio shapes that you might want to substitute and kind of gravitate towards. And you don't always have to do it on just one bar of a progression. You can do everything. The only danger you run into is if you do kind of like replacement stuff like this over everything, it ceases to be a chord progression and just becomes kind of nonsense. Like if we replace the C with kind of like a C major arpeggio, and then the G with maybe like a G Mixolydian mode run. That's why it's good to know your modes. Instead of sounding like, it would sound like. It's like, oh my gosh, please stop. It's like ridiculous. It's too much. You kind of want to do this tastefully, so you're just kind of inserting into a chord progression something that's going to make it sound a little more lively, right? Chords are still great. All the open chords are awesome to know for sure, and they kind of provide like an anchor and a glue to some of these things. But I think it's a really great thing to do to learn some of these chord shapes, to learn some of these scale shapes and arpeggios, because then you can incorporate them into your playing, making things more lively and stop boring everybody to death.